You'll probably agree when I say that a lot of people don't really understand the difference between a Brandy Crusta and the more widely known Sidecar. In fact, they're often served pretty interchangeably, and I'll definitely happily put my hands up and say by me until recently. They actually started off life though as quite independent drinks despite the similarity of the ingredients. So what is the difference? Jerry Thomas's How to Mix Drinks, published in 1862, is basically the Magna Carta for bartenders. It put down on paper this new phenomenon for the first time. In it, he made a distinction between plain drinks and fancy drinks. The Crusta was invented in New Orleans in the 1850s by an Italian bartender named Joseph Santini, and it fits firmly into this fancy category with its over-the-top garnish. And yes, at this point, a large lemon twist and a sugar rim was considered pretty extra, which may seem odd in an era where I've been handed a perfumed origami panda head to sniff while I drink and had an entire frozen cream egg as the ice block in my Manhattan. The other thing which sets this cocktail apart was its ratio. So the original recipe adheres to the classic cocktail formulation of spirit, bitters, sugar, water, but adds a squeeze of lemon. Now a squeeze is very little, probably only around 5 to 10 ml, and so the Crusta was actually a spirit-forward cocktail, pretty much a twist on the old-fashioned and really quite different to the sours and daisies, where lemon juice makes up a much larger proportion of the drink. And here we start to see the difference between the Brandy Crusta and the Sidecar. Adding maraschino cherry liqueur to a Brandy Crusta also became quite popular at the turn of the 19th century. It's not the original, but another way that a modern Brandy Crusta may differ from the Sidecar. As a side note, the Crusta could be based on any spirit, but brandy quickly became the favourite. Brandy was actually the spirit of choice for many older cocktails, and the original proportions meant it relied on a very tasty base spirit. A combination of phylloxera, which is a root disease that absolutely gutted France's wine-making industry in the late 19th century, and then Prohibition made good quality brandy pretty impossible to get a hold of in the States. And this is where you start to see local American whiskey overtake as the go-to dark spirit, and the Brandy Crusta fell out of fashion. It's still not exactly ubiquitous, but has certainly enjoyed a revival of sorts thanks to our current cocktail obsession. The Sidecar's exact birthplace is debated, shocking in the world of cocktail history, I know, but it's safe to say it gained renown after World War I at Harry's New York bar in Paris and was inducted into the Cocktail Hall of Fame with its inclusion in the seminal bartending book by the very same Harry, Harry's ABC of Mixing Cocktails. The name of the cocktail is also disputed. Some say it was named for an army captain who used to arrive at the bar in a motorcycle sidecar. Others say that it comes from the bartending practice of pouring any excess cocktail from the shaker into a little shot glass to the side once the cocktail glass is full. Early recipes, including Harry Macahone's, actually called for a 1-1-1 ratio, which makes for quite a clumsy tasting drink. I prefer to see it as the love child of the Brandy Crusta and a classic sour, so using the flavour combination from one and the proportions of the other to create a bright but rich and complex cocktail which has stood the test of time. Before we get stuck into making and comparing the two, let's have a closer look at the ingredients. Brandy as a category is really varied. It's basically just a spirit which is made from distilling fermented fruit juice. So it's generally understood that if something is called just brandy, it will be made from grapes, but you can obviously get, for example, apple brandy or pear brandy. It's a massive category and the quality varies wildly from really low-grade cooking brandy right through to some of the most elite spirits in the world. Particular regions which are well known for brandy will have tighter regulations about what can have their name on the label, hence why cognac and armagnac are seen as such benchmarks. Cocktail recipes will often call for cognac specifically, which basically just means you need to use something good quality. But of course, there are now great brandies being made in many different parts of the world, including here in Australia. It is still a good rule of thumb though if you're unsure what to buy, and as there's some big producers there such as Hennessy and Courvoisier, you can still get something decent that's not going to break the bank. The Brandy Crusta recipe really heroes the brandy. This drink is meant to be a really rich and interesting sipper, so look for a brandy which has good body and plenty to think about. I'm using Sullivan's Cove XO, which is a Tasmanian brandy, and it is a little bit bougie, but I've wanted to use it in a cocktail for so long because it has incredible depth of flavor, really intense dried fruit, and a little hint of funk, the same way you get with good rums. It is XO, which stands for extra old, meaning it's been aged for at least 6 years, so heaps of complexity. This is a great cocktail to try out a special bottle in, as you're still very much tasting the spirit, but also really any decent quality brandy will do. Because the Sidecar is brighter and more citrus heavy, I'm using a more fruit forward and lighter brandy. Hennessy is really seen as the quintessential cognac, and I find the VS, which stands for very special, mixes really well in cocktails. It's at least 2 years old. The VSOP, so very special old product, is at least 4 years old, and that'll just bring a bit more spice and woody notes. Saint Remy, Martel, Courvoisier, and so on will all absolutely substitute in nicely. Just choose your favorite. Curacao or triple sec are just orange liqueurs, and again can be quite varied. It's good to look at what end result you want before choosing. For the Brandy Crusta, we're looking for depth of flavor and a fairly dry finish. I'm going to use Pierre Ferrand Curacao. This is made with a cognac base and layered with spices and orange peel, so it's really going to complement the intense brandy we're using. For the Sidecar, we're looking for something to balance out the lemon juice and add a nice zestiness. So I'm using the Old Faithful Cointreau. It has a more neutral base spirit and a little more sweetness, so it won't overpower, but rather just offer a nice balance and viscosity. Now, as I've said, the garnish and the serve of this drink is really what it's all about. It's what made it a fancy cocktail to begin with. So we better make sure that we get all of that nicely prepared now. Peel as long a twist of lemon as you can and trim it down if necessary. And just sort of pull it towards you in a diagonal right round from top to bottom. Hopefully your peeler is a little bit sharper than mine. It's a bit painful, but you should be able to get a nice long piece of lemon like this. As I said, it's up to you. This has managed to stay quite nice and thin, so we probably don't really need to take any of the pith off. And it's up to you if you want to trim it down just so it looks a little bit neater. I kind of like it being rustic, so I'm just gonna leave it as is. Then we are gonna take a little wedge out of the lemon to rim our glass with as well. Then grab whatever kind of fancy goblety glass you want to use and just run right around the outside with your lemon and dab in your sugar. So I like to kind of get it all over the glass. It's gonna be all over your lips, even on your fingers, sort of as you're drinking it. And I enjoy that. You can obviously be a little bit more restrained with the sugar if you prefer. Now we're just gonna wind the lemon peel around the inside of the glass. And then we're gonna build your drink. So we've got 60 mils of brandy. Now, I know some of you are kind of purists out there and prefer just drinking sort of really good quality and more expensive spirits neat, and I completely respect that. Obviously, as a cocktail bartender, I love getting to use kind of fancier spirits, and I think that you get to almost see a different side of them as well than when you're just sipping them neat, because obviously you've got those, it's interacting with all those other flavors. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to finally get to use this one in a cocktail. 15 mils of our Pierre Ferrand dry curacao. This one has deliberately been formulated to kind of mimic the kinds of curacao that would have been around when recipes like this sort of came to be. So definitely a good option. And then just a little, like even 5 to 10 mils of maraschino if you're choosing to use it, just as that little extra dimension of flavor. And 2 dashes of good old Angostura bitters. And finally, the thing that differentiates it is little 15 mils of lemon juice. Then fill your cocktail shaker with ice. We're just gonna do a short and sharp shake on this one. We actually don't want heaps and heaps of dilution, it's still pretty boozy. And then a double strain. I mean, how fancy does that look? The Brandy Crusta. So now you know. Obviously, we're all about minimizing wastage here on Behind the Bar, so just gonna use this lemon that I've already peeled just to get a little coin to spritz over the top. I just like a little spritz on most drinks, to be honest. I love those really fresh lemon oils, but absolutely not necessary and not necessarily mandated in the recipe, so completely up to you there. And then we're just gonna squeeze some lemon juice. So we're gonna go 50 mils of our brandy, 20 mils of Cointreau. We did only have the litre bottles at work and it's a bit heavy, to be honest. My bartending arm is out of practice. 20 mils of lemon juice. Now I'm gonna do a little half sugar rim because, as I say, as much as it's not actually part of the original Sidecar recipe, I think a lot of people expect it nowadays, and it looks really pretty. So this way, if I do it halfway around, then they can kind of decide whether they want to use it or not. And again, I've just stuck with something a little bit more wine glass looking, but a bit more modern, sort of, again, as a nod to that Brandy Crusta predecessor, but absolutely just a Cooper martini glass works as well. Then we're gonna fill our tins with ice, pop your shaker tins together, make sure it's a nice straight line, and then shake as hard as you can. Just gonna do the little twist over the top. There we have a Sidecar. So now you know. Before I do a little taste test on these, I do want to take a quick moment to acknowledge our awesome Patreon supporters and thank them for helping to keep this channel going. All right, well, we now have both the Brandy Crusta and the Sidecar in front of me, so I should probably give them a taste and see what I think. Start with the Sidecar because it's going to be a little bit fresher. It's a delicious drink because it's got all the kind of lightness and freshness if you like those shaken, more kind of citrusy drinks. But it does, you know, it's still brandy, so it's still got that real kind of raisiny depth of flavor that you get from that spirit, which is really delicious. So I guess it's kind of, you know, if you already like your sort of sours, maybe a margarita or that sort of thing, it can be something different for you to try. I would say this definitely needs a sugar rim. If you're not planning on doing that, then a little dash of sugar or even a little bit more Cointreau. But with the sugar rim, you know, it just stays quite nice and tart. The brandy still comes through heaps. It's definitely not lost in there. But yeah, nice and refreshing. And then this guy, you can obviously see from the color, if you can see through the frosted glass, but you can kind of tell that it's probably going to be a little bit more lethal. It's like almost kind of chewy. It's got such, yeah, again, just really, really intense brandy flavor. And that little bit of maraschino just sort of, you couldn't, I don't think that I would honestly be able to like taste test that it was in there if I didn't know, but it just kind of underpins it and brings this like lovely berry kind of backbone to it. And yeah, as much as the lemon juice is in there, it's almost just kind of the same way that the bitters are there. Everything's just working to support the brandy. So I would definitely happily sit on this and kind of almost let it come up to room temperature, you know, over the course of a kind of after dinner drink. This one I could probably drink about 3 of in half an hour, but this one I'd definitely be happy to ruminate on for a while. So both excellent drinks, but really quite different when you make them like this.